All right, man. It looks like we got some huge news coming out of the state of North Carolina for Kamala Harris. All of a sudden, we got some really, really good polling numbers coming out for Kamala Harris. Arguably the best polls we've seen, especially given the pollsters. So here we have a brand new poll hot off the presses dated 9/7. This is coming from Survey USA. They are an A+ rated pollster, the highest possible grade. And what we have is Harris Trump. We got 49% going to Kamala Harris, Trump getting 46%. That is a +3 margin in favor of Kamala Harris. The previous poll, notably, again, we don't really want to look at end numbers necessarily because the election is so far away. And I would argue that the election has not actually started yet. I actually believe it's going to start potentially tomorrow or for you today. But it could take longer, though, because a September 10th debate is actually pretty early for a first-time debate. So it might not even start now. But we want to look at the shift. So it's a +3 surge in just a couple weeks here, like 2 weeks. 900 likely voters, a solid sample size, maybe even a little bit big for a singular state. But also, I also want to show you something, a really big deal. So we want to look back at the 2022 polls as well. Now, the only caveat here is it didn't include Trump, and Trump has this weird overperformance factor that other Republicans don't have. Especially the candidates that Trump chooses, they have all the negatives of being a Trump-picked person, but none of the benefits. For some reason, people like Trump, but they don't care for people he picks. So Survey USA is a top 4 2022 pollster. So this was the 4th most accurate pollster in 2022. So we can see the average error was only 2.4 points. The polls that are getting flooded, garbage pollsters, Trafalgar, look at this disgusting 5.3 average error. Insider Advantage, another one, 5.3 average of error. Patriot Polling, another one dropping polls. We'll reference this later. 5.5 average polling. Wick, 5.7. Disgusting poll numbers. Survey USA, top 4, very, very good. They actually have an average bias of even, so it doesn't go in either direction. So this is really great news. We have a 3-point surge in a really, really high-quality pollster coming out of this. That is really, really great news to see. Also, I believe in this poll also, we had actually a favorability that was actually positive for Kamala Harris. In this poll, I believe it was either this one or the Quinnipiac poll, but Kamala Harris was actually at 50% favorable. I think it was 50-46, so +4. Walz was +5 at 40-35 favorable, and then Trump was -9, I think at 44-53, and then Vance, I think, was like -6. So the favorability advantage in that poll was in favor of Kamala Harris, which is really, really good. That could decide the election, especially if we see the numbers go down to, like, let's say Trump is at 42. I think the really strong interaction effect will be if Trump is down to 42 and then Kamala Harris is at like, or Kamala Harris is above 50. Now, we also have another poll, same state, North Carolina, new general election poll. Harris, same exact numbers, 49-46, +3 margin. Another solid pollster, not as good. Quinnipiac, a B+ pollster, so not a bad pollster. 940 likely voters, similar sample size, dated 9/8, September 8th. Another 3-point margin. These are very large absolute value. In absolute value, these are very large margins. And this is what's another interesting thing is somehow the Quinnipiac poll has North Carolina +3 for Harris, but +4 for Georgia. So that doesn't make sense that there's a 7% margin between them. The +4 is heavily out of line with the average. So I think the +4 is off. I think they're probably underestimating Trump here in the numbers. They're probably he's probably around 48 or 49 in these numbers. So if we go back and look at North Carolina back in 2020, what we're able to see is there was a polling margin of 1.8 at the end of the election. And what happened was Trump majorly overperformed by 3%. They missed a lot of his support. And then Biden barely underperformed in the aggregate. But in a lot of these polls, he was at 50%, and he did not manage to actually hit 49%. We can see these numbers. I think a lot of people forget just how close this race was. It was only 1.4 points. It was closer than Florida. This was very, very close. And what we know is for a fact, it's the third fastest growing, or one of those states, third fastest growing or somewhere up there states in terms of population growth. So a lot of net migration in the suburbs are the areas that are getting infused. Now, the big difference between Georgia and North Carolina is I think it's not black people that are the source of that surge, but rather white people. So it's probably not going to be as strong because we know Kamala Harris is really strong with the fundamentals. She's doing really well with newly registered voters in the state, in states with young voters, young women voters, etc. Those people are going to get missed by the polls. So we should predict an overperformance for Kamala Harris as opposed to underperformance. The good news is, according to the aggregate, Biden only got underestimated by 0.2. So it's not really a big issue of underperformance. It's more so just a lot of support got missed for Trump. But Trump may be weaker. And then, but I do think that, yeah, they're underestimating him here. But here's what I'll say. I think if Kamala Harris is polling at 50% and she's up by 3, she's guaranteed a victory, but it'll be by a hair. So if you have 49, 46s, the election is going to be really, really close and you could lose. If it's 50, 47, I think you win by just the smallest of a hair. The smallest of a hair. Plus 3, 3.5, I think is the margin where she wins by a hair if it's like this. However, if she's at 50 and Trump is at 49 or somewhere like that, then the margins don't matter anymore. Because the only reason the margin would matter is it's a function of Trump's polling numbers. So if Trump is polling at 46, they're obviously underestimating him. I think he has floors and ceilings, differing ones. And the national polls, I think his floor is 46, his ceiling is 48. And then in the Sun Belt, I think his floor is like 48 and his ceiling is probably like 49.5. And then in the Rust Belt, I think his floor is like 46 to 47, and then his ceiling is like 49 maybe. His performance in the Rust Bowl was actually really, really bad. I don't even think he hit 49 anywhere, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not even sure. I don't even think he hit 49 in any state. So really, really good polls coming out from North Carolina. The only downside is there is also some breaking news here. You see, it says breaking news: NC Supreme Court rules that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. must be removed from the state ballot. This is some bad news, unfortunately, because the election is going to be decided within the margins. So, for example, I'll condition the impact of these people because Kennedy would take away some voters that would balance out Stein and West both being on the ballot. Now, I want to condition this statement. So, when we look at this 2016 Michigan results, Jill Stein gets 1.1%. Hillary loses by 0.3. It was actually like 0.23. In this scenario, I think if Jill Stein doesn't run, I think mathematically she would only need about 1/5 of her 1.1% to go to Hillary, which I think would definitely happen. She wins the election. However, in Wisconsin, she's down by 1 and Stein gets 1.1%. So you would have to get over 90% of Jill Stein's vote. That's not going to happen because a lot of the voters are not going to vote for you because they don't like you because you suck. So she still would have lost the election, in my opinion, even if Jill Stein didn't run. Even here it's 0.8, but you're not going to get 100% of... Actually, here it's 1.2. Even with 100% of Jill Stein's vote, you wouldn't be able to win. So even then, you don't win the election. So, but in Michigan, you do. And so I think this is going to be decided by a hair. So I think that the NC ruling here could decide the election because I think it's going to be razor thin. So maybe whereas instead of it going like 0.2 in favor of Harris, maybe it goes like 0.3 in favor of Trump, for example. Because you're going to have Stein and West eating her, and then Trump, unfortunately, will not be getting eaten out. He'll just be by himself, which is unfortunate. But we also have some bracking news here again. So Kamala Harris retakes the lead in the aggregate polling for North Carolina in the 538 aggregate. So we can see she's now up 0.3 after these polls come out. She was actually down 0.8. She was down quite a bit. She had taken the lead for a bit back in late August, but then she ended up losing it after about, looks like 4 days. She has now retaken the lead officially in the aggregate. It's probably not going to last, though. I think it's probably not going to last. We'll probably get overtaken again. We have these Quinnipiac polls here that are both Trump +3, even in the head-to-head and in the poll with all the candidates. We also had a morning consult poll that has them even. This is pretty good as well. Survey USA also +3. This is the one that's really good. And I also wanted to show you something as well. So we can do an injective comparison with Survey USA back in 2022 or in 2020. And we could see it was 48-48. So they were barely off by 1.4 in terms of a margin because Trump ends up winning by 1.4. So this is actually a really good pollster. They're really good because their last poll, August 23rd to 26th, which is right before Election Day, is really close, was even Steven. So they're very trustworthy. They were really good in 2022, and they were pretty much on the money here. Really close, 48-48. They were barely off. So they were really, really close. So really good in terms of like, okay, this is a high quality poll. And we are going to have to kind of deal with some of the kind of noise that's happening with these kinds of results. Like we could see there was sort of also a poll here from Florida Atlantic that's +1, which that's not bad. +1 poll right now is not bad. But there's this Patriot polling here, which is garbage pollster that we saw from 2022. Trump +3 or Trump +1 insider advantage. But again, I want to repeat, even being up 1 or 2 or whatever, or like being down 1 or whatever right now is fine. But I think on election day, if you want to win, you're either at 50 or 51% or you're up by 3. You need one of the two. If you have both, I think you're guaranteed to win. But I do want to just warn you. I think that, I don't know if you guys know, regression modeling, but, it's typical just like single linear regression. That E term is the error term, right? It kind of takes into account all the noise that's not taken account for, right? So we're going to have to be careful about all the noise because a lot of these polls are going to drop that's going to have weird results where it's like, that doesn't make sense. Like I think Morning Consult just dropped a poll that had Trump +9. That obviously doesn't make sense in Texas. When the poll came out with 3 and then a bunch of number 5s, it logically doesn't make sense. And they usually lean blue with their polls. So we're going to have to sort of stay even-keeled. The election potentially might start tomorrow. It hasn't started yet. But nonetheless, that is what we're looking at. Great news for Kamala Harris in North Carolina. Only possibly being blunted here by the fact that RFK is going to be on the ballot. Now, the map that I personally would recommend, to win if you're Kamala Harris, I would personally recommend a map in which you actually end up like this is what I would recommend. Because I think GA is a pretty good scenario for you. I think it's very solid to go blue because of the fundamentals. AZ, I think, could go blue very likely. NV, Michigan. Once you win one of PA, NC, or GA, you want to focus on the other states. The problem being you don't know which ones you're going to win. But you want to shift to one of the other states after you win one because winning the other two is just so difficult, right? So this I actually think is the best pathway to victory. But let me know what you think the best pathway to victory is down below. And do you think NC is going to flip blue? The governor's race is also there. Mark Robinson, a really horrible candidate. Stein is destroying him. So that hopefully will help as well. She's also having a large lead in the gender gap as well. And unfortunately, abortion is not on the ballot, which is going to hurt. But still, maybe she's able to pull out the victory.